1939 में वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 होती है और उसके बाद से ये ख़बरें आनी शुरू हो जाती हैं कि ब्रिटेन एंड अदर यूरोपियन कंट्रीज़ वुड डीकॉलोनाइज द वर्ल्ड, और उसमें इंडिया को भी डीकॉलोनाइज किया जाएगा. इट मीन्स देयर वर कमिंग न्यूज़ एंड इवन दे केम टू इंडिया दैट British departure was now imminent. After the war, maybe the British would leave. And on the other hand, Muslims knew very well what would happen after the British departure. After British departure, on the basis of majority, the Hindus would win every elections and form their own governments in center and would be able to make their own constitutions and impose Hindu religion or Hindu rule over Muslims in all India. That is why they were worried. Then there was also the feeling of fear amongst the Muslims that the Hindus were hell-bent upon, avenging the long rule of the Muslims upon them. इस वजह से मुसलमान जो हैं वो फिर 1940 में मंटो पार्क में जमा होते हैं एनुअल सेशन में मुस्लिम लीग में, और वहाँ पर करारदाद पेश की जाती है. रेजोल्यूशन वाज पास्ड. फजल हक जो हैं, जो कि बंगाल के शेर भी कहलाते थे, ही प्रेजेंटेड दैट रेजोल्यूशन. इट वाज पास्ड यूनानिमसली एंड they demanded of their own separate homeland, but this separate homeland was never named as Pakistan in that resolution. उसमें कहा जाता है कि मेजॉरिटी एरियाज ऑफ मुस्लिम्स ऑन ईस्ट एंड वेस्टर्न इंडिया दे शुड बी ग्रुप्ड इनटू इंडिपेंडेंट स्टेट्स. अब एक स्टेट नहीं बल्कि स्टेट्स का जिक्र है कि ईस्टर्न और वेस्टर्न जो इंडिया है उसमें जो मुसलमान पॉपुलेटेड एरियाज़ हैं उनको ग्रुप करके तो स्टेट्स 2 बनाई जाएं, यानी बंगाल की और उसके बाद फिर इस एरिया की जहाँ पे आज पाकिस्तान है. और उसमें शामिल होने वाले जितने भी प्रोविंसेस होंगे, दैट वाज आल्सो अ प्रॉमिस इन दैट रेजोल्यूशन दैट all the provinces or all the federating units of these independent states would be given autonomy. तो ये रेजोल्यूशन जो है वो पास की जाती है. अब हम देखते हैं कि व्हाट आर द मेजर रीजंस फॉर दैट रेजोल्यूशन. जैसे कि मैंने आपको पहले बताया कि रीजंस में एक तो मुस्लिम्स हैड एक्सपीरियंस्ड हिंदू रूल फ्रॉम 1937 to 1939. That was a little trailer for them, and Congress put them into the tight corner. And that is why so many other people, they think that it was not Muslim League which made Pakistan, it was Congress which made Pakistan. Otherwise, Muslim League and the Muslim leaders in India, they were politically struggling for federal form of India where Muslim rights were enshrined. But now they had seen that even minority rights were given in 1935 Act, but in 1937 rule, the Congress did not care for any kind of constitutional guarantee and tried to eliminate Muslim culture. That was that fear which came true. So they could not believe that federal India with constitutional Muslim rights could save them. So in 1940 they demanded that only separate Muslim state could save them, and no other option was there before them. Then secondly, what was the reason? That the British departure was imminent, and now once the British were going to depart, otherwise under British they were happily living because they knew very well that the British would try to maintain some kind of balance between Hindus and Muslims. The justice demanded them, and they said, they were not very much worried, but after the British, what would happen? Because the Muslims always thought serving or being servants to the British was far better than being slaves to the Hindus. So British departure was imminent. The war once ended, the British might leave India. So this was the time to demand of them for their own separate homeland, because once they departed, there would never be any chance of the separate homeland. Then for the sake of peace in India, in India, if the Muslims and Hindus, they live together, there would be chances of civil war, and that in form of that, or in case of that civil war, peace could never be established there, and that vacuum could be created. So for this purpose, Muslims demanded their rule. Look at 1940 Lahore resolution. It called for Muslim majority areas of east and west of India to be grouped into separate states on the basis of separate ideology. I mean, two nation theory that had become now the official policy of Muslim League. And then what was the reasons for it? First was Congress rule 1937-39. Then British departure now had become imminent. What would happen after the British departure? There was another reason, two nation theory. The Muslim nationalism had become prominent by that time, and they had realized their identity now. I mean, their identity was quite established by that time. So fear of Hindu revenge, that the Hindus would revenge upon them after the British departed, because Hindus thought that their ancestors ruled Hindustan and imposed upon them the darker period. That is why there was a fear of Hindu revenge upon Muslims. Then international principle of self-determination, that was another reason. It had become an international principle, and by that time it was quite clear. It had become the law of League of Nations that all the national groups, I mean any group which claimed the shared ideology or the shared culture, that would become a nation, and these national groups qualified for self-determination, I mean separate state. ये principle जो है later on became the principle of United Nations. इसी वजह से Muslims also claim that they qualified for the separate state because they made a separate nation in India. And even Quaid-e-Azam at that time, while speaking to the session, that annual session, he said, this is not just the domestic issue or the Indian issue. Internal issue नहीं था, बल्कि इसके अलावा इंटरनल इशू तो था ही, बल्कि इसके अलावा ये एक इंटरनेशनल इशू है. दिस वाज एन इंटरनेशनल इशू अकॉर्डिंग टू Quaid-e-Azam. So Quaid-e-Azam called it an international issue, and Muslims qualified for a separate nation. And then even for Indian peace, it was necessary for the Muslims to get a separate homeland. Otherwise, Hindu-Muslim divide had reached to such an extent that they would clash with each other, leaving vacuum in India for the other nations to interfere, such as communists could come into India to fill that gap or vacuum once that vacuum was created after the civil war between Hindus and Muslims, and that was imminent. Both of them would clash if a separate homeland was not achieved by the Muslims. So these were different reasons for Lahore resolution, but the most important one perhaps sometimes is considered to be the Congress rule, because Congress made Muslims realize that they needed state, otherwise their constitutional guarantees could not be respected once Hindu Raj came in India. आगे हम बात करेंगे. Second was two nation theory, which was very, very important because Congress made them realize that they were a separate nation and their culture was separate. That is why under Congress rule their culture was not protected. So what is two nation theory? Let's talk about two nation theory. Let's talk about